Morena Koto, welcome to our story time for today. Great to have you with us. We've only got 3 of these left today, tomorrow, and Friday, and then it's all back to school on Monday. But first up, today we're going to read the story Oi, Frog. So let's have a look. Oi, Frog, sit on a log, said the cat. But I don't want to sit on a log, said the frog. Logs are all knobbly and uncomfortable, and they can give you splinters in your bottom. I don't care, said the cat. You're a frog, so you must sit on a log. Can I sit on a mat? Asked the frog. Only cats sit on mats, said the cat. What about a chair? Said the frog. I wouldn't mind sitting on a chair. Hares sit on chairs, said the cat. Perhaps I could sit on a stool, said the frog. Mules sit on stools, said the cat. What about a sofa? Said the frog. I could stretch right out on a sofa. Gophers sit on sofas, said the cat. It's very simple, really. Cats sit on mats, hares sit on chairs, mules sit on stools, gophers sit on sofas, and frogs sit on logs. What do lions sit on? Asked the frog. Lions sit on irons, said the cat. Ouch, said the frog. What do parrots sit on? Parrots sit on carrots, said the cat. Lions sit on irons and parrots sit on carrots. Doesn't sound very comfortable, said the frog. It's not about being comfortable, said the cat. It's about doing the right thing. What do foxes sit on? Asked the frog. Foxes sit on boxes. Foxes sit on boxes and fleas sit on peas. You can see them right down the very bottom there. What do goats sit on? Asked the frog. Goats sit on coats, said the cat. Goats sit on coats, cows sit on ploughs, and storks sit on forks. What do gorillas sit on? Asked the frog. Gorillas sit on pillars, said the cat. Gorillas sit on pillars. Rats sit on hats, weasels sit on easels, and moles sit on poles. What do seals sit on? Asked the frog. Don't you know anything? Said the cat. Seals sit on wheels, doves sit on gloves, newts sit on flutes, lizards sit on wizards, and apes sit on grapes. What do puffins? Asked the What about puffins? Asked the frog. Puffins sit on muffins, said the cat. Puffins sit on muffins, snakes sit on cakes, owls sit on towels, gibbons sit on ribbons, lambs sit on jams, bees sit on keys, and pumas sit on satsumas. Well, I never knew that, said the frog. Well, you do now, said the cat. What do dogs sit on? Asked the frog. I was hoping you weren't going to ask for that, said the cat. Help! Dogs sit on frogs. Hope you enjoyed that. Awesome. Right, we're going to carry on with George's Marvellous Medicine. I'm going to try and time it right so we can finish the book on Friday. So, next chapter is A Crane for Grandma. Grandma, from high up on the rooftop, could see everything that was going on, and she didn't like what she saw. She wanted to be the center of attention, and nobody was taking the slightest notice of her. George and Mr. Cranky were running around getting excited about the enormous animals. Mrs. Cranky was washing up in the kitchen, and Grandma was all alone on the rooftop. Hey, you, she yelled. George, get me a cup of tea this minute, you idle little beast. Don't listen to the old goat, Mr. Cranky said. She's stuck where she is, and that's a good thing too. But we can't leave her up there, Dad, George said. What if it rains? George, Grandma yelled. Oh, you horrible little boy, you disgusting little worm. Fetch me a cup of tea at once and a slice of currant cake. We'll have to get her out, Dad, George said. She won't give us any peace if we don't. Mrs. Cranky came outside and she agreed with George. She's my own mother, she said. She's a pain in the neck, Mr. Cranky said. I don't care, said Mrs. Cranky said. I'm not leaving my own mother sticking up through the roof for the rest of her life. So in the end, Mr. Cranky telephoned the crane company and asked them to send their biggest crane out to the house at once. The crane arrived 1 hour later. It was on wheels and there were 2 men inside it. The crane climbed up onto the roof and put ropes under Grandma's arms. Then she was lifted up through the roof. In a way, the medicine had done Grandma good. It had not made her any less grumpy or bad-tempered, but it seemed to have cured all her aches and pains, and she was suddenly as frisky as a ferret. As soon as the crane had lowered her to the ground, she ran over to George's huge pony, Jack Frost, and jumped on his back. This ancient old hag, who was now as tall as a house, then galloped around the farm on the gigantic pony, jumping over trees and shouting, out my way, clear the deck, stand back, all you miserable midgets, or I'll trample you to death, and other silly things like that. But because Grandma was now much too tall to get back into the house, she had to sleep that night in the hay barn with the mice and rats. And there's Grandma getting picked up by the crane and riding the horse. Next chapter, Mr. Cranky's great idea. The next day, George's father came down to breakfast in a state of greater excitement than ever. I've been awake all night and thinking about it, he cried. What about, Dad? About your marvellous medicine, of course. We can't stop now, my boy. We must start making more of it at once. More and more and more. The giant saucepan had been completely emptied the day before because there had been so many sheep, pigs, cows, and bullocks to be dosed. Why do we need more, Dad? George asked. We've done all our own animals, and we've made Grandma feel as frisky as a ferret, even though she does have to sleep in the barn. My dear boy, cried Mr. Killy Cranky, we need barrels and barrels of it, tons and tons. Then we will sell it to every farmer in the world so that all of them can make giant animals. We'll build a marvellous medicine factory and sell the stuff in bottles at £5 a time. We'll become rich and you'll become famous. But wait a minute, Dad, George said. There's no waiting, cried Mr. Cranky, working himself up so much that he put butter in his coffee and milk on his toast. Don't you understand what this tremendous invention of yours is going to do to the world? Nobody will ever go hungry again. Why won't they? Asked George. Because one giant cow will make 50 buckets of milk a day, cried Mr. Cranky, waving his arms. One giant chicken will make 100 fried chicken dinners, and one giant pig will give you 1,000 pork chops. It's tremendous, my dear boy. It's fantastic. It'll change the world. But wait a minute, Dad, George said again. Don't keep saying, wait a minute, shouted Mr. Cranky. There isn't a minute to wait. We must get cracking at once. Do calm down, my dear, Mrs. Cranky said from the other end of the table, and stop putting marmalade on your cornflakes. The heck with my cornflakes, cried Mr. Cranky, leaping up from his chair. Come on, George, let's get going. And the first thing we're going to do is make one more saucepan as a tester. But, Dad, said little George, the trouble is, there won't be any trouble, boy, cried Mr. Cranky. How can there possibly be any trouble? All you've got to do is put the same stuff in the saucepan as you did yesterday. And while you're doing it, I'll write down each and every item and then that's how we'll make the magic recipe. But, Dad, George said, please listen to me. Why don't you listen to him, Mrs. Cranky said. The boy's trying to tell you something. But Mr. Cranky was too excited to listen and to anyone except himself. And then, he cried, when the new mixture's ready, we'll test out on an old hen just to make absolutely sure we've got it right. And after that, we'll all shout hooray and build the giant factory. But, Dad, come on now, what is it you want to say? I can't possibly remember all the hundreds of things I put into the saucepan to make the medicine, George said. Of course you can, my dear boy, cried Mr. Cranky. I'll help you. I'll jog your memory. You'll get it in the end. You see if you don't. Now, Dad, what was the very first thing you put in? I went to the bathroom first, George said. I used a lot of things in the bathroom and on Mummy's dressing table. Come on then, cried Mr. Killy Cranky. Up we go to the bathroom. When they got there, they found, of course, a whole lot of empty tubes and empty aerosols and empty bottles. That's great, said Mr. Cranky. That tells us exactly what you used. If anything is empty, it means you used it. So Mr. Cranky started making a list of everything that was empty in the bathroom. Then they went to Mrs. Cranky's dressing table. A box of powder, said Mr. Cranky, writing it down. Elder's hair set, flowers of turnips, perfume. Great. This is going to be easy. Where'd you go next? To the laundry room, George said. But are you sure you haven't missed anything up there, Dad? That's up to you, my boy, Mr. Cranky said. Have I? I don't think so, George said. So down they went to the laundry room, and once again Mr. Cranky wrote down the names of all the empty bottles and cans. My goodness me, what a mass of stuff you used, he cried. No wonder it did magic things. Is that the lot? No, Dad, it's not, George said, and he led his father to the shed where the animal medicines were kept and showed him the big 5 empty bottles up on the shelf. Mr. Cranky wrote down all the names. Anything else? Mr. Cranky asked. Little George scratched his head and thought, but he couldn't remember having put anything else in. Mr. Killy Cranky leapt into his car and drove down to the village and bought new bottles and tubes and cans of everything on his list. Then he went to the vet and got a fresh supply of all the animal medicines George had used. Now, show me what you did. Or show me how you did it, George, he said. Come along, show me exactly how you mix them all together. Marvellous Medicine number 2. They were in the kitchen now, and the big saucepan was on the stove. All the things Mr. Cranky had bought were lined up near the sink. "Come along, my boy," cried Mr. Killy Cranky. "Which one did you put in first?" "This one," George said. "Golden Gloss hair shampoo." He emptied the bottle into the pan. "Now the toothpaste," George went on, "and the shaving soap, and the face cream, and the nail varnish. Keep it up, my boy," cried Mr. Cranky, dancing around the kitchen. "Keep putting them in. Don't stop. Don't pause. Don't hesitate. It's a pleasure, my dear fellow, to watch your work." One by one, George paused and squeezed things into the saucepan. With everything so close at hand, the whole job didn't take him more than 10 minutes. But when it was all done, the saucepan didn't somehow seem to be quite as full as it had been the first time. "Now, what'd you do?" cried Mr. Cranky. "Did you stir it?" "I boiled it," George said, "but not for long, and I stirred it as well." So Mr. Cranky lit the gas under the saucepan, and George stirred the mixture with the same long wooden spoon he'd used before. "It's not brown enough," George said. "Wait a minute, I think I know what I've forgotten." "What?" cried Mr. Cranky. "Tell me quick, because if we've forgotten one tiny thing, then it won't work. At least not in the same way." "A quart of brown gloss paint," George said. "That's what I've forgotten." Mr. Killy Cranky shot out of the house and into his car like a rocket. He sped down to the village, bought the paint, rushed back again. He opened the can in the kitchen and handed it to George. George poured the paint into the saucepan. "Aha, that's better," George said. "That's more like the right color." "It's boiling," cried Mr. Cranky. "It's boiling and bubbling, George. Is it ready yet?" "It's ready," George said. "At least I hope so." "Right," shouted Mr. Cranky, hopping around. "Let's test it. Let's give it to a chicken." "My heavens alive, why don't you calm down a bit?" Mrs. Cranky said, coming into the kitchen. "Calm down?" said Mr. Cranky. "You expect me to calm down? And here we are mixing up the greatest medicine ever discovered in the history of the world. Come along, George. Dip a cupful out the saucepan and get a spoon, and we'll give some to the chicken, just to make absolutely certain we've got the correct mixture." Outside in the yard, there were several chickens that hadn't had any of George's Marvellous Medicine #1. They were pecking about in the dirt in that silly way chickens do. George crouched down, holding out a spoonful of Marvellous Medicine #2. "Come on, chicken," he said. "Come on, good chick, 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 chick." A white chicken with black specks on its feathers looked up at George. It walked to the spoon and went peck. The effect that medicine #2 had on this chicken was not quite the same as the effect produced by medicine #1, but it was very interesting. "Whoosh!" shrieked the chicken, and it shot 6 feet up in the air and came down again. Then sparks came flying out of its beak, bright yellow sparks of fire, as though someone was sharpening a knife on a grindstone inside its tummy. Then its legs began to grow longer. Its body stayed the same size, but the 2 thin yellow legs got longer and longer and longer and longer still. "What's happening to it?" cried Mr. Killy Cranky. "Something's wrong," George said. The legs went on growing, and the more they went, the higher up into the air went the chicken's body. When the legs were about 15 feet long, they stopped growing. The chicken looked perfectly absurd with long, long legs and its ordinary little body perched high on top. It was like a chicken on stilts. "Oh, me Saint dance!" cried Mr. Killy Cranky. "We've got it wrong. The chicken's no good to anybody. It's all legs. No one wants chicken legs." "I must have left something out," George said. "I know you left something out," cried Mr. Cranky. "Think, boy, what was it you left out?" "Ah, I've got it," said George. "What was it? Quick!" "Flea powder for dogs," George said. "You mean you put flea powder in the first one?" "Yes, Dad, I did a whole carton of it." "Then that's the answer." "Wait a minute," said George. "Did we have brown shoe polish on our list?" "We did not," said Mr. Cranky. "I used that too," said George. "Well, no wonder it went wrong," said Mr. Cranky. He was already running to his car, and soon he was heading down to the village to buy more flea powder and more shoe polish. And there is the chicken. All right, we're going to read Marvellous Medicine #3, and we're going to find out what happens. All right, well, great to see you guys. Have a great day, and we'll catch up with you all tomorrow. Ka kite anō.